have been dead if it hadn't been for a passing merman. It sounds romantic, I know, but unfortunately he was kind of the reverse of what you'd expect a merman to be.
I wish to make love to you.
With over 1,000 monsters to choose from in D&D, it can be hard to know which ones to use, and even harder to know how to play them. What weapons do they favor? What tactics would they use? How do they interact with other types of monsters? These are all questions that can come up to DMs that are looking to make their combats more enticing for their players. It's certainly one that I struggled with. That's why I'm back today with another monster breakdown for D&D. Hello again everyone, I'm Bill from Altroll, and today I'm going to dive into a brief history of a D&D creature, how that history was adapted into 5th edition, and how this lore can help game masters make their combat encounters better. So, whether you're here for the cool lore breakdown or for the combat tactics, I'm hoping to give you a lot more to chew on when it comes to the monsters we face in D&D. For our 7th episode, let's look at a fish out of water, the Kuo-Toa. The Kuo-Toa as an idea have existed across various cultures in history and mythology, with examples of human-fish hybrids such as the sirens of Greek mythology, the amoebae from Japanese folklore, and the Loveland frogman from Ohio. While the true origin of where these myths come from is unknown, the Kuo-Toa borrow from these myths to form their own identity within D&D. In a forum post from 2006, Gary Gygax stated that the Kuo-Toa were largely from his own imagination, though he does admit that there may have been some inspiration from H.P. Lovecraft and the creature from the Black Lagoon thrown in there. First appearing in the Shrine of the Kuo-Toa in 1978, the Kuo-Toa are a race of amphibious, humanoid fish people who live in the Underdark. Long ago, they used to be a surface-dwelling race, and were a favored target of illithids to serve as slaves for their empire. Unable to resist their psychic powers, the Kuo-Toa who survived were left with shattered minds. Once the Mind Flayer Empire abandoned them, the mad Kuo-Toa were driven underground by other humanoid races who saw them as a threat. Being driven underground didn't end their punishment, however. They now had to contend with all the dangers of the Underdark, and the immense amount of time spent there took away their ability to tolerate sunlight. The Kuo-Toa's most notable enemy from the Underdark is the Drow. Since the first day the two races met, the Drow have slain Kuo-Toa on sight, and the two live in a bitter rivalry with one another. To protect themselves, the Kuo-Toa adopted a fierce religious fervor, and began inventing gods to shield them from harm. To their surprise, the gods they invented soon became real, the energy of their collective subconscious manifesting the god as a physical entity. One of the most revered gods of the Kuo-Toa is Blibdoolpool, the Sea Mother, who takes the form of a female human with a crayfish head, a crayfish's claws, and an articulated shell covering her shoulders. When not creating their own gods, the Kuo-Toa also revere aboleths, who take advantage of the Kuo-Toa's reverence for their own machinations against the gods. Leading the reverence of these gods are the Kuo-Toa Archpriests. When a Kuo-Toa's belief in its god becomes powerful enough, they manifest the abilities of a high cleric and take on the mantle of Archpriest. Surrounding themselves with fanatical devotees known as monitors, deadly hand-to-hand combatants that act as their eyes and ears, the Archpriest demands all its subjects worship a specific god. When a devotee shows promise, the Archpriest may bestow certain spells to them, turning them into whips. One or more of these whips are also the Archpriest's children, and their primary role in Kuo-Toan society is to fight to the death to claim the throne when the Archpriest dies. This relationship is tenuous though, as a malcontent whip can have their powers taken away just as quickly as they were granted. The rest of Kuo-Toan society hasn't developed much underground, with most Kuo-Toa wearing simple garments and wielding crude weapons. They don't wear armor, preferring their natural rubbery hide for protection. Their preferred weapons tend to be nets and pincer staves, which allow them to immobilize and capture foes alive. They also tend to coat their shields with a sticky goo that catches incoming weapons, further immobilizing their opponents. While uncommon, some Kuo-Toa may also wear jewelry made from scavenged bones, shells, pearls, gems, and carapace fragments. Now that we've examined how Kuo-Toa lore has been implemented into D&D, let's pivot over to their mechanics by looking at their stat blocks. Since there are so many unique types of Kuo-Toa, this video will cover the 4 stat blocks that they have: the regular Kuo-Toa, the Kuo-Toa Whip, the Kuo-Toa Monitor, and the Kuo-Toa Archpriest. Each monster's stat block analysis will be timestamped, so if you want to skip around to 1 or 2 specific stat blocks, you can do so with YouTube's chapter system, or look at the timestamps in the description. This is what the Kuo-Toa's stat block looks like. Let's break it down section by section and look at what's listed here in detail. Size in 5th edition defines the space a creature takes up in combat, with a medium creature taking up a 5 foot by 5 foot square or hex on a battle map. Using the 3.5 edition Dungeon Master's Guide, the Kuo-Toa ranges from 4 to 8 feet tall and weighs anywhere between 60 and 500 pounds. Their creature type is humanoid, with Kuo-Toa in parentheses. Kuo-Toa makes up the subrace that includes Kuo-Toa, Whips, Monitors, and Archpriests. Alignment broadly describes a creature's general outlook on the world and combines their moral beliefs with their attitudes towards society and order. The alignment of all Kuo-Toa is neutral evil, meaning they will do whatever they can get away with without compassion or qualms. Kuo-Toa have an armor class of 13, 4d8 hit points, or 18 on average, and have a movement and swim speed of 30 feet. I will note that armor class is with the use of a shield, so if the Kuo-Toa is holding a net or using its spear in 2 hands, its armor class would go down to 11. As for their ability scores, the Kuo-Toa have 13 strength, 10 dexterity, 11 constitution, 11 intelligence, 10 wisdom, and 8 charisma. With 10 being average for an ability score, the Kuo-Toa has a high strength, average dexterity, constitution, intelligence, and wisdom, and low charisma. For their skills and proficiencies, they have a +4 to perception, dark vision out to 120 feet, a passive perception of 14, speak undercommon, have a proficiency bonus of +2, have a challenge rating of 1/4, and award 50 experience points when killed. In terms of special abilities, Kuo-Toa are amphibious, have otherworldly perception, are slippery, have sunlight sensitivity, and have the sticky shield reaction. Amphibious just means that Kuo-Toa can breathe in air or in water. Otherworldly perception allows Kuo-Toa to sense the presence of any creature within 30 feet that is invisible or on the ethereal plane, and can pinpoint such creatures that are moving. Slippery grants the Kuo-Toa advantage on ability checks and saving throws to escape grapples. Sunlight sensitivity imposes disadvantage on attack rolls and perception checks relying on sight when the Kuo-Toa are in direct sunlight. Lastly here, the sticky shield states that when a creature misses the Kuo-Toa with a melee weapon attack, the Kuo-Toa uses its sticky shield to catch the weapon. The attacker must succeed on a DC 11 strength saving throw, or the weapon becomes stuck. If the weapon's wielder can't or won't let go of the weapon, the wielder is grappled while the weapon is stuck. While stuck, the weapon also can't be used. A creature can pull the weapon free by taking an action to make a DC 11 strength check and succeeding. As for its offensive actions, the Kuo-Toa has a bite ability, a spear attack, and a net attack. The bite attack has a +3 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, and deals 1d4 + 1 piercing damage on a hit. The spear attack has a +3 to hit, a melee reach of 5 feet, a thrown range of 20 feet normally and 60 feet with disadvantage, deals 1d6 + 1 piercing damage when thrown or used in melee attacks with one hand, and deals 1d8 + 1 piercing damage if used with two hands to make a melee attack. The net attack has a +3 to hit, a range of 5 feet normally and 15 feet at disadvantage, and can target large creatures or smaller. On a hit, the target is restrained and must use its action to make a DC 10 strength check to free itself or another creature in a net, ending the effect on a success. The net has an armor class of 10, and dealing 5 slashing damage to it destroys the net. Lastly, we have environment tags. When using digital resources, all Kuo-Toa tend to be found in the Underdark. The whip is a medium creature taking up a 5 foot by 5 foot square or hex on a battle map. It ranges from 4 to 8 feet tall and weighs anywhere between 60 and 500 pounds. Their creature type is humanoid, with Kuo-Toa in parentheses. Kuo-Toa makes up the subrace that includes Kuo-Toa, whips, monitors, and archpriests. Alignment broadly describes a creature's general outlook on the world and combines their moral beliefs with their attitudes towards society and order. The alignment of all Kuo-Toa is neutral evil, meaning they will do whatever they can get away with without compassion or qualms. Whips have an armor class of 11, 10d8 + 20 hit points, or 65 on average, and have a movement and swim speed of 30 feet. As for their ability scores, they have 14 strength, 10 dexterity, 14 constitution, 12 intelligence, 14 wisdom, and 11 charisma. With 10 being the average for ability scores, whips have a high strength, constitution, and wisdom, average intelligence, and relatively low dexterity and charisma. For their skills and proficiencies, they have a +6 to perception, a +4 to religion, dark vision out to 120 feet, a passive perception of 16, speak undercommon, have a +2 proficiency bonus, have a challenge rating of 1, and award 200 experience points when killed. In terms of special abilities, the whips are amphibious, have otherworldly perception, are slippery, have sunlight sensitivity, and have spellcasting. Amphibious means that the whip can breathe in air or in water. Otherworldly perception allows the whip to sense the presence of any creature within 30 feet that is invisible or on the ethereal plane, and can pinpoint such creatures that are moving. Slippery grants the whip advantage on ability checks and saving throws to escape grapples. Sunlight sensitivity imposes disadvantage on attack rolls and perception checks relying on sight while the whip is in direct sunlight. Finally, the whip is a second-level spellcaster that uses wisdom as their spellcasting modifier. They can cast Sacred Flame and Thaumaturgy at will, and have 3 first-level spell slots to be able to cast Bane and Shield of Faith. As for its offensive actions, the whip has a bite attack, a pincer staff attack, and the multi-attack feature, which allows it to make one bite attack and one pincer staff attack per attack action. Their bite attack has a +4 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, and deals 1d4 + 2 piercing damage on a hit. Their pincer staff attack has a +4 to hit, a reach of 10 feet, deals 1d6 + 2 piercing damage on a hit, and if the target hit is of medium size or smaller, it is grappled until it escapes the DC 14 skill check required. Lastly, we have environment tags. When using digital resources, all Kuo-Toa tend to be found in the Underdark. The Monitor is a medium creature that takes up a 5 foot by 5 foot square or hex on a battle map. It can range from 4 to 8 feet tall and weighs anywhere between 60 and 500 pounds. The Monitor's creature type is just humanoid, though they're definitely still Kuo-Toa. I'm unsure if this is just a misprint or someone didn't file this correctly, but generally speaking, the Monitor should still be part of the Kuo-Toa subrace. Alignment broadly describes a creature's general outlook on the world and combines their moral beliefs with their attitudes towards society and order. The alignment of all Kuo-Toa is neutral evil, meaning they will do whatever they can get away with without compassion or qualms. Monitors have an armor class of 13, 10d8 plus 20 hit points, or 65 on average, and have a movement and swim speed of 30 feet. As for their ability scores, they have 14 strength, 10 dexterity, 14 constitution, 12 intelligence, 14 wisdom, and 11 charisma. With 10 being the average for ability scores, they have high strength, constitution, and wisdom, average intelligence, and relatively low dexterity and charisma. For their skills and proficiencies, the Monitor has a +6 to perception, a +4 to religion, dark vision out to 120 feet, a passive perception of 16, speaks Undercommon, has a +2 proficiency bonus, has a challenge rating of 3, and awards 700 experience points when killed. In terms of special abilities, the Monitors are amphibious, have otherworldly perception, are slippery, and have sunlight sensitivity. Amphibious just means the Monitor can breathe in air or in water. Otherworldly perception allows the Monitor to sense the presence of any creature within 30 feet that is invisible or on the ethereal plane, and can pinpoint such creatures that are moving. Slippery grants the Monitor advantage on ability checks and saving throws to escape grapples. Lastly, sunlight sensitivity imposes disadvantage on attack rolls and perception checks relying on sight while the Monitor is in direct sunlight. As for its offensive actions, the Monitor has a bite attack, an unarmed strike, and the multi-attack feature, which allows it to make one bite attack and 2 unarmed strikes per attack action. Their bite attack has a +6 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, and deals 1d4 + 2 piercing damage on a hit. Their unarmed strike has a +6 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, deals 1d6 + 2 bludgeoning, and 1d6 lightning damage on a hit, and when hit, the target can't take reactions until the end of the Monitor's next turn. Lastly, we have environment tags. When using digital resources, all Kuo-Toa tend to be found in the Underdark. The Archpriest is a medium creature taking up a 5 foot by 5 foot square or hex on a battle map. It can range from 4 to 8 feet tall and weighs anywhere between 60 and 500 pounds. Their creature type is humanoid, with Kuo-Toa in parentheses. Kuo-Toa makes up the subrace that includes Kuo-Toa, Whips, Monitors, and Archpriests. Alignment broadly describes a creature's general outlook on the world and combines their moral beliefs with their attitudes toward society and order. The alignment of all Kuo-Toa is neutral evil, meaning they will do whatever they can get away with without compassion or qualms. They have an armor class of 13, 13d8 plus 39 hit points, or 97 on average, and have a movement and swim speed of 30 feet. As for their ability scores, they have 16 strength, 14 dexterity, 16 constitution, 13 intelligence, 16 wisdom, and 14 charisma. With 10 being average for an ability score, they have a high strength, constitution, and wisdom, average dexterity and charisma, and relatively low intelligence. For their skills and proficiencies, they have a +9 to perception, a +6 to religion, dark vision out to 120 feet, a passive perception of 19, speak undercommon, have a +3 proficiency bonus, have a challenge rating of 6, and award 2,300 experience points when killed. In terms of special abilities, the Archpriests are amphibious, have otherworldly perception, are slippery, have sunlight sensitivity, and have spellcasting. Amphibious just means that the Archpriest can breathe in air or in water. Otherworldly perception allows the Archpriest to sense the presence of any creature within 30 feet that is invisible or on the ethereal plane, and can pinpoint such creatures that are moving. Slippery grants the Archpriest advantage on ability checks and saving throws to escape grapples. Sunlight sensitivity imposes disadvantage on attack rolls and perception checks relying on sight while the Archpriest is in direct sunlight. Lastly, the Archpriest is a 10th level spellcaster that uses Wisdom as their spellcasting modifier. They can cast Guidance, Sacred Flame, and Thaumaturgy at will. They have 4 first level spell slots to cast Detect Magic, Sanctuary, and Shield of Faith. They have 3 second level spell slots to cast Hold Person and Spiritual Weapon. They have 3 third level spell slots to cast Spirit Guardians and Tongues. They have 3 fourth level spell slots to cast Control Water and Divination. And they have 2 fifth level spell slots to cast Mass Cure Wounds and Scrying. As for its offensive actions, the Archpriest has a Scepter attack, an Unarmed Strike, and the multi-attack feature that allows it to make 2 melee attacks per attack action. Their Scepter attack has a +6 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, and deals 1d6 +3 bludgeoning and 4d6 lightning damage on a hit. Their Unarmed Strike has a +6 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, and deals 1d4 +3 bludgeoning damage on a hit. Lastly, we have environment tags. When using digital resources, all Kuo-Toa tend to be found in the Underdark. Now that we've gone through and sorted out their stat blocks, we can begin to relate the Kuo-Toan lore and abilities to how we should be using them in combat encounters. Specifically, we're going to look at how they behave, how they would approach a combat situation, and how to get into the mind of a Kuo-Toa if you want to fight effectively as one. How do we do this? Well, we'll need to take the lore and stat blocks of all of these monsters and compare that with how this information is intended. referencing tactics and interpretations from The Monsters Know What They're Doing by Keith Amon, which is linked in the description below. Let's start by going through Amon's key assumptions one by one and relating them to each type of Kuo-Toa as we go. The first of Amon's assumptions is that most creatures want to survive, and if seriously wounded, will try to flee combat. Exceptions to this rule are fanatics or intelligent beings who believe they'll be hunted down and killed if they do flee. Now, seriously wounded can be subjective, but we can assume that threshold to roughly be 1/3 of a creature's health. On average, the Kuo-Toa has 18 hit points, the Whip and Monitor have 65 hit points, and the Archpriest has 97 hit points. Dividing each of these by 3, the thresholds would be 6 for the Kuo-Toa, 22 for the Whip and Monitor, and 32 for the Archpriest. Therefore, when reduced to these thresholds or lower, the Kuo-Toa will begin to flee combat. Next up, let's look at how their alignment can impact their thinking. On the scale of good to evil, good creatures tend to be friendly to others, whereas evil creatures are hostile to others. On the scale of lawful to chaotic, lawful monsters may try to capture or non-lethally subdue others, whereas chaotic monsters may kill them. All Kuo-Toa are neutral evil, so we know 2 major things about them. First, since they're halfway between lawful and chaotic, they have a 50-50 shot of either capturing or killing those they defeat in battle, though their lore and abilities imply they prefer to capture their foes. Secondly, since Kuo-Toa are evil creatures, they will be hostile to other creatures. Continuing with their mindset, let's dive into some of their mental ability scores, starting with intelligence. The basic Kuo-Toa has an intelligence score of 11. With regard to intelligence scores of 11, Amon states, a creature with intelligence of 8 to 11 is unsophisticated in its tactics and largely lacking in strategy, but it can tell when things are going wrong and adjust to some degree. Whips and Monitors, on the other hand, have an intelligence score of 12, and the Archpriest has an intelligence score of 13. With regard to intelligence scores of 12 or higher, Amon states, a creature with intelligence of 12 or higher can come up with a good plan and coordinate with others. It probably also has multiple ways of attacking and or defending and knows which is better in which situation. So essentially, while base Kuo-Toa aren't great when it comes to strategy, the Whips, Monitors, and Archpriests make up for that in battle. Kuo-Toa accompanied by these smarter variants will be able to defer their tactical thinking to these smarter creatures rather than having to think on the fly themselves. Next up, let's look at Wisdom. The Kuo-Toa has a Wisdom score of 10. With regard to Wisdom scores of 10, Amon states, a creature with Wisdom of 8 to 11 knows when to flee, but is indiscriminate in choosing targets. Whips and Monitors, on the other hand, have Wisdom scores of 14, and the Archpriest has a Wisdom score of 16. With regards to Wisdom scores of 14 or higher, Amon states, a creature with Wisdom of 14 or higher chooses its battles carefully, and fights only when it's sure it will win or will be killed if it doesn't fight. Given these stats, lesser Kuo-Toa will be able to tell when to flee and when to fight, but only the smarter variants of Kuo-Toa will be able to tell whether a battle is winnable before starting the fight. Now that we've set up how they think, let's look at the Kuo-Toa's physical abilities that influence how they fight. Thinking like Amon, we can assume the following. Creatures with high strength focus on melee combat, and won't need to compensate with greater numbers. As such, they don't need to outnumber an enemy to be willing to take a fight with them. Creatures with low dexterity will need to choose their battles carefully. Since their ability to avoid damage is poor, they'll want some other sort of compensatory advantage. Creatures with high constitution typically have a hit point advantage over their enemies, and because of that, they're less likely to hide in combat since they can afford to soak up a couple attacks before going down. Now, to recap our earlier stat block analysis, basic Kuo-Toa have a high strength but lower relative dexterity and constitution scores. Their attacks are very melee focused, but they also hold a lot of utility through their nets and sticky shields. Whips and monitors have high strength and constitution, but lower dexterity, like the basic Kuo-Toa. The monitor's abilities are focused around their unarmed strikes, whereas the whips have some grappling attacks plus some spellcasting, which we'll discuss later. Archpriests have high strength and constitution, and an okay dexterity score. In melee, their scepter can work well with the extra damage it does, but that's really their only option outside of spellcasting. Since the whips and archpriests have spellcasting, we should also review their spellcasting ability, Wisdom. Wisdom is tied for the highest ability score for the whips and archpriests, meaning both will attempt to use their spellcasting when applicable. Their spell list is pulled from the cleric, meaning there's a good mix of support and utility spells, but very few focus on direct damage. The whip has a nice combo they can pull off by casting Bane on their opponents to lower their saving throws before throwing Sacred Flame at them. Since Bane requires concentration, they can't do this and cast Shield of Faith. But this gives the DM using them a choice between protecting important monsters with an armor class bonus or weakening the party to future spell saves. Overall, they have good ranged spell options to use in the backline, while monitors and basic Kuo-Toa rush the front line. Archpriests, on the other hand, are built to be a full support caster. While given a lot of spells that work for roleplay flavor, such as scrying, divination, and tongues, their combat-focused spells focus on healing or protecting their allies, using spells like Mass Cure Wounds, Spirit Guardians, Shield of Faith, and Guidance. With the sheer variety of spells they bring to the table, and the amount of slots they have for them, DMs who really lean into the Archpriest can build some interesting combat scenarios for their players. Given all of this information, we can presume that Kuo-Toa are melee brutes that want to get up close and damage their opponents enough to capture them. The Kuo-Toa and whips will focus on pinning down the enemy with nets and pincers. Monitors will move forward and deal out unarmed damage to tankier enemies, and the Archpriest will assist with cleric spells to support their allies and control their enemies. Now, the last major premise from Amon is that in D&D 5th edition, unless otherwise specified, any creature gets their full movement, one action, one bonus action, and one reaction, just like any player character does. Amon posits that any creature that exists within the game world will have evolved in accordance with this rule, and will seek to obtain the best possible result from the action economy of the game. This means they will combine whatever movement, actions, bonus actions, and reactions are available to it for the best possible outcome. Kuo-Toa, unlike other low CR monsters, do actually have a lot of different abilities that contribute to the individual action economy of a fight. The basic Kuo-Toa have their sticky shield reaction on top of their normal attacks that allows them to catch the weapons of their opponents, a rather unique melee option that leaves their opponent grappled or without their favorite weapon. Whips, monitors, and archpriests, on the other hand, all have multi-attack, but it's most effective on the monitor, who can make 3 attacks per attack action. Archpriests will likely get more use out of their advanced spellcasting with access to action and bonus action spellcasting, whereas whips are going to be more situational as to whether they should be in melee with multi-attack or in the backline slinging spells. Generally speaking, if there's an Archpriest present, the rest of the Kuo-Toa should probably focus on melee. But if there's not an Archpriest present, the whip can fill that role while the Monitor and basic Kuo-Toa fight in melee. So, with all these assumptions laid out, what do we now know about how to use the Kuo-Toa? First, basic Kuo-Toa don't do a ton of damage and are pretty easy to hit, but they do have a good amount of hit points and utility moves. Their role should be to soak up hits in the front line as fodder rather than deal damage, and pin down enemies with nets and their sticky shields. Second, whips are the lower level leaders of Kuo-Toa groups, using their spellcasting to bolster their allies and weaken their enemies. If the front line begins to falter, they excel just as well on the front, using their pincer staff to damage and grapple enemies. Third, monitors are the damage dealers of Kuo-Toan society, using their lightning-imbued unarmed strikes to take down high-priority foes. According to their lore, they're likely to accompany archpriests, but would make a good lesser boss for a lower-level adventuring party. Fourth, archpriests are the most powerful of the Kuo-Toa, with a heavier focus on spellcasting than all the rest. Their varied spell list gives them a ton of options on the battlefield, and when all else fails, they still hold up pretty well in melee with their scepter attacks. Fifth, if an individual Kuo-Toa is reduced to their hit point threshold listed earlier, less than half of a group's starting number, or if their commander is killed, they will begin to flee combat. Sixth, if Kuo-Toa win combat, they will capture their opponents and bring them to their lair or temple to be a sacrifice in the Archpriest's drowning pools for their god. And with that final point, we come to the end with the Kuo-Toa. A unique threat when compared to the rest of the monsters found in the Underdark, Kuo-Toa make a great threat for lower or mid-tier parties with their unique combat style. Plus, their lore being that they're insanely zealous fish people who can create gods if they believe hard enough makes for a very entertaining and layered campaign premise as well. But with that being said, what do you all think of the Kuo-Toa? If you'd like to chat about it with us, you can do so over on the Alt-Roll Discord, which is linked in the description. While on the server, you can pop into our courses that teach the basics of D&D, and if you like what we do here, supporting us on our Ko-fi goes a long way in helping us keep Alt-Roll going. For now, that's all I had for you. Thank you all so much, make sure to have a great rest of your day, and I'll see all of you next time.